being in contact with that whole world of the senses. And we really need to recapture that. Now, I'm basically a thinker. I read and I study and I love that kind of stuff. And I've had to work very, very hard to pay attention to my feelings and to trust them. And in the long run, as so many before me have come to learn, that's really where you live. You know, you have this feeling that you should do this or you should do that. And a basic dimension of discernment, which we'll talk about tomorrow, is listen to those feelings. Learn to sort out which of those feelings are from you, from indigestion, from your conditioning of your past, which are from God. And I have a basic rule of thumb that sorts out most of the problems of my life. And that rule of thumb, which will get you through most of yours, is don't sweat the small stuff. If you get a feeling that maybe you ought to call somebody, call them. That's a little thing. You know, if you got a feeling, gee, maybe I ought to go to church today. St. Francis de Sales, in his book, The Introduction to Devout Life, says these are like angels. They're messages of God. They're inspirations. And we ought to pay attention to them and do them. It's little stuff. But if you get a feeling in your heart, God wants me to sell my house and my car and go live in New York City in the Bowery, you ought to check that out with somebody. We've had people say, my children are full of Satan. The devil has got them, so I'm going to roast them in the oven. A couple did that in Lewiston, Maine a couple of years ago. They put one of the kids in the oven. Yeah. Don't sweat the small stuff. On the other hand, you know. So going with the flow means you try to see, what is God doing? What is God doing in my life? Why is this person in my life? Why is that aggravation there? What's happening in my life? And you try to figure that out. Which way is it going? Like I say, the church has been going through this massive change, along with the whole world. Every civilization has gone through a massive change today. It's one of those periods in history which is terrible to endure because you're neither in or out. You haven't settled into a new place yet, and there's countercurrents and revolutions, and it's a mess. And I like peace and quiet. And there is none. You know, there's aggravation everywhere. And there's injustice in the church, out of the church. There's all kinds of bad stuff happening. And I had to come to terms with, hey, Lord, what are you doing? We know, for example, there's a crisis in clergy in the Roman Catholic Church today. You feel it. In the area where I am, there used to be 8 priests. There's now 2. And we're asked to do a lot more than we were ever asked to do 20 years ago. There's all kinds of committees and RCIA and all kinds of things that we need to do. But the Lord isn't providing more people in leadership. What's He saying to the church? What's He saying to the church? Some people say that actually God's trying to call all kinds of young people into service, but they're not generous anymore. Really? They did a Gallup poll did a survey among college students and graduate students in universities across America. I said, would you serve the church? And there was a large percentage of young people said they'd be happy to, but they didn't want anything to do with celibacy. They'd be happy to serve the church, but we got a rule which we made about celibate clergy. Now, what's God doing? Is God depriving us of one kind of leadership because He wants the church to move and grow into a new kind of leadership? What's going on? We've lived in patriarchal societies from the beginning, run by men the way men run things, in pyramids. You know, men always run things in terms of structures of the hierarchies of authority and the power. You know, the higher you go, the more people you can lord it over. And Jesus said, it must not be that way among you. Those are His precise words when dealing with authority. It must not be that way among you. Those who would be greatest must serve. So, well, I'm serving, but I got a bigger position. Really? Maybe the whole structure needs to be done over again. We're in the same position in the church today, for example, as the early church was. It began as a series of house churches, of little prayer groups. And the bigger it got, the more it needed some organization. We invented the organization. In the beginning, there were women leaders of these house churches as much as men leaders. And when the men took over, that was the end of the women leadership. That's historical fact. And it's been that way. There's a consciousness raising that's been going on all over the world that in fact maybe women are human beings. And then maybe there's something to the feminine consciousness which says more important than pyramids are people in circles holding hands. Maybe relationships are more important than the ordering of power. Maybe when Jesus said there should be no power structures among you, he meant it. So maybe we're in that throes of listening to God and say, here's what I want to do, and since you won't do it, I'm going to leave you in a position where you're not going to have much chance to do anything else. What's God doing? That getting in the flow of that is terribly important. And for that, you got to be unencumbered. You have to have that open heart and mind, which isn't possessed by the past, possessed by human traditions, where you're not attached to any one way of looking at things, so you can try to see what God's doing. And one thing you can be sure of, when the Spirit is at work, it's going to be new. When the Spirit's working, Rosemary Houghton did this wonderful book on the Catholic thing, and she spoke about the last books of the Hebrew Scriptures are called Sophia, wisdom, which is feminine. And Sophia is all about relationships. And that's precisely the flowering of that best and final revelation of the Old Testament comes to fruition in the New Testament in Jesus, who is the embodiment of wisdom. The prologue of John's Gospel could be taken right out of the Old Testament wisdom literature. It's exactly the same thing. And what Jesus was about was relationships. Not the hierarchy of power, but relationships in love. In giving to each other, in serving each other. One thing that the whole history of the Hebrew people makes very clear is that patriarchy doesn't work. That the ordering of power always leads to violence and to war. And nobody has ever won from a war. Nobody has ever won from wars. Nobody's ever won from using of power. What works is love. That was the whole message of Jesus. So maybe we're into discovering a whole new way of becoming God's people in God's way. And that in fact, before God, we're all equal. There are no distinctions between, as the letter to the Ephesians, between Greek and Slave, no, it's Colossians, whatever. Between Greek and Jew, between slave and free, between male and female. There are no distinctions before God. There's a lot to learn there. There's a lot to take in and struggle with. How do I get off on that? Oh, how do we get into flow? And in your own life, you just see, hey, people come into your life, situations come into your life. If bad stuff comes in, the Lord's trying to teach you a lesson. Don't blame the person. Don't blame the circumstances. Say, what am I supposed to learn from this? But when you learn it, it won't come back. Because you're in the flow and you'll be moving. That's got a lot to do with the synchronicity we talked about earlier today. That in fact God has got a whole universe and everything is coming together and working for your good. And you're not arranging it, but people will come into your life just as you need it. Whatever you need is going to come to you, and it's going to be a surprise. And it's wonderful. And we gave a few examples of that. God's in charge, and the flow of life is such that you can count on it. And you can always count on being surprised again and again in ways that you need when you begin to notice it. But it can't happen if you're trying to control. If you're trying to control other people and control all the dimensions of your life, it won't happen. Because God can't reach it. You're paddling against the river. You just got to lay back and let things. That doesn't mean you let people walk over you or use you. Doesn't mean that at all. If somebody's doing something that you don't approve of or has done something to hurt you, tell them. But don't expect any results. You don't have to expect results, but you don't have to lie down and roll over and be a wimp. You say, I've had enough of that. And I'm not going to take that anymore. And if that's the way you want things to be, then do it to somebody else. So that comes from an inner strength and a sense of loving yourself and knowing that, and no more than anybody else, do you have to take any junk. Let's see, there was a question relating to that. What do you do about a spouse who keeps hurting you and lying to you, who likes to embarrass you and all this other kind of stuff? What do you do about that? Glory be to God. It's working now, eh? Is that Canadian or not? Once, and they were ready to kill me. When they redid the tape to reproduce it, they had to edit the thing and cut that part out. But it was fun. You talk about people being abused or somebody abusing you. Abuse is always a two-way street. There is abuse because somebody allows themselves to be abused. And people do this for all kinds of reasons. All the interviews and studies done on abused women, men think that's a fun thing to do, I guess. It's so rampant in Western civilization. All of it, the woman still wants the man. And you take it long enough, you begin to believe you deserve it. And you keep letting it happen. Nobody ever has to let it happen. All you got to say is, enough. That's enough of that. And if it's not enough, I'm leaving. Goodbye. You don't have to stay around and allow yourself to be slapped around or abused. You simply don't have to. You're a child of God. You're an important person. And if you have any love for yourself, then you got to love yourself enough to live in a way that doesn't allow that. But that comes from inside you. And it's the only place it can come from. That's when it stops. Takes two people. You follow? Any questions about that? I remember, many years ago, I was given a retreat to a priest up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Archbishop Hayes, Jim Hayes was there. Wonderful, wonderful man of God. And at that time, they were passing a law in Italy on divorce, and they never had a divorce law in Italy. And the Pope came out and said, urging the people not to vote for divorce, to vote against the law. And Archbishop Hayes, in the interview on television, was asked, what do you think? And Archbishop Hayes says, I think there has to be a law for divorce. Because we need a law to protect people who are being hurt. And if we don't have the law, people will continue to be hurt. And he was right. He was right. Far better is for people to work out their problems, but some problems can't be worked out. And there's no need to be slapped around or abused by anybody. And when I say, live and let live and love and let people be on their own path, you can let people be on their own path and also tell them that you're not going to put up with any of their junk. You can let people be on their own path and say, but don't cross my path. You can protect yourself. You owe it to yourself. It's a way of telling yourself, live. It's respecting your own sacredness. Any questions or reactions to that? Right on, right on. Would you say that blessing yourself and praying your grace before your meal in public is good or detrimental? I say, do your own thing. If you like to do that, do it. If you want to do it to make a show, then it'll come across as a show. If you do it because that's in your heart, and in a simple way you say, I like to do that, people come to respect the fact that you simply like to do that. But whatever is phony, whatever is done to manipulate, or I'm going to be a witness in public, Don't be a witness. Don't fall off the step, John. Don't be a witness in public. Just be yourself. Just be yourself. I've been around renewal groups and parish groups for a long, long time now. 40 years. And I have encountered many people. I remember one time when I was at St. Philip's in Auburn, Maine, and every week more people were coming to church. When I started there were about 600 families. When I left, there were 1,000. And people were coming to church, and they were saying they were lining up 4 and 5 a week to sign up for the parish. And they asked them, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Well, you know, there's a couple of ladies from your parish in our office, and they have something. There's kind of a peace and a serenity, and there's something about them. We wanted to find out what it was, so we asked them. They said, 'Come on to our church.' And we're here, and now we know what it is, and we want to join. We want to find what your people have." You don't have to go around selling it. You know, that's a desire to change somebody. It's just be you. You know, live your life with the Lord and with each other and with this world, and that's enough. So if you want to say grace before meals in a restaurant, wonderful. Just be you. Why do people who have divorced have to get an annulment before they can get married in the Catholic Church? Because you belong to a community. The community has its rules. And because the church stands primarily and foremost for what is the best thing, the marriage that stays together, where couples work at their relationship and work through the inevitable problems. Sometimes that isn't possible, and the couple makes the decision, a discernment, that we were never meant to be together in the first place. We got into it for the wrong reasons. We should split. Well, because you belong to the community of the state, you have to go through a divorce proceeding. Because you belong to the community of the church, you submit it to the elders of the church, who will work with you and saying, yeah, that really is the discernment, that's right. You know, you were not meant for each other. This is not a marriage of Christ. And so now you're free to remarry in the community of the church. But a community's got to have some rules, or there's nothing but chaos. The discernment process could be a lot simpler, perhaps, but it is certainly a lot more compassionate than it was 30 years ago. It's a very compassionate process today. And I know many people have gone through that process and discovered, as they looked at their own motives and their background and all the rest of it, a real freeing up by looking at it and having other people look at it with them and saying, you made the right decision. Yeah?
How many times, let's say you've been married in the Catholic Church, you got your annulment, married again in the Catholic Church, how many times can you be annulled?
How many times can it be annulled? Lots of times. Lots. But all the tribunals that I know of today, if it happens more than once, they put a little rider on the annulment that says before you attempt to get married in the Catholic Church again, you must go through some psychological counseling so that they can get to the root of what your problem is.
What if somebody's been married in a Protestant church?
Let's talk about those marriage problems some other place.
The only thing I want to know is, do they have to get annulled in the Protestant church, or can you?
No, the Protestant churches don't have an annulment process. It's only in the Catholic Church that I know of. Father, you said you learn about yourself from the people who hurt you. What do you mean? I've been rejected, criticized, abused by a lot of people over my life. That's standard for a course, probably me no more than anybody else. I've come to a long, long time ago. I started to look at myself and ask myself, why do I feel hurt? What did I expect of the other person? What do I expect of myself? Why do I feel hurt by that? Why shouldn't I expect it? And it's in that introspection that I've come to realize lot of things about the way I am. Matter of fact, if more people knew me better, I'd probably be rejected by more people. And I shared some of that wisdom with you already. You know, when you come to realize that people are only where they are. And if somebody rejects you, as people rejected me, they're only on their path, in their particular place in their path. They're seeing things from a particular point of view, and I was a problem to them from where they were. That's all right. And I have to deal with myself. At one time, I did a lot of work on myself using Matthew and Dennis Lynn's book, Healing Life's Hurts, going through the 5 stages of denial and all that sort of thing. And I remember sitting in a chair where I do most of my praying. And I was going through the final depression stage where you begin to discover that you've been part of the problem from the beginning. And see, you reach this place where you're really angry at somebody who's done something to you, and you got to deal with that. And then you say, well, I'd forgive them if only they would. You know, and when you can let go of that, you begin to get a suspicion. Maybe they wouldn't have been so hard on you if you had maybe communicated better, if you hadn't struck back in this way, if you hadn't, acted that way. And you begin to see, oh, I've been part of the problem. And I asked the Lord to help me see in through my life the ways in which I have been part of the problem. And I was overwhelmed. It was just this clarity about all the junk and rottenness in my life. I've lied and stolen and cheated, and about everything you can think of I've done in one way or another. And I was just overwhelmed with this sense of sinfulness. And I opened up my Bible, and where I looked down was the story of Peter betraying Jesus. And I've read that, I've come across that many times. And I've often thought, Lord, don't let me ever betray you. And I realized I had betrayed you in all kinds of ways. And I just felt like the Lord enveloping me with his love. It was such a blessed moment. And he said, Joe, I never held that against Peter. I've never held anything against you. And he made me look at the crucifix I had on the wall and said, see, I died for you. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped loving Peter. And I'm with you now. Let's get on with it. Speaking of that, Danilo's got a collection of stories, about 3 different books with collections of stories, which are really thought-provoking. And there's this one story of a woman who is purported to be a mystic, who had experiences of God, mystical experiences. So the local bishop called her in. And he said, I'm the bishop here. She said, yes, Bishop. He said, I'm responsible for authenticating, these kinds of things before they get out of hand. And she said, yes, Bishop. He said, would you do me a favor then? The next time you have one of these experiences, I want you to ask God to reveal to you your bishop's secret sins. Will you do that? And she said, yes, Bishop. So she went home, and about a month later, the bishop gets a phone call, and it's this lady. He says, come on in. And the lady comes in, and he says, you've had another experience of God? She said, yes, Bishop. And did you do what I asked you to do? She said, yes, Bishop. He said, well, what did God say? He said, God says, I forget. Isn't that wonderful? You ask God your secret sins, he says, I don't remember. I don't remember. Any further questions, we'll get to them later. We talked about an awful lot of stuff this morning. We covered an awful lot of ground, and there's no way that you can absorb all of that at once. That's why I think the tapes might be helpful. But if different words speak to you now, work with them. And the basic, simple things that the Lord is asking us to trust in him, because that's the truest expression of our love for him, is trust. It's really the deepest expression of love for each other, to trust each other with our hearts, with our lives, with our hopes, with our dreams, to trust. The Lord's asking us to trust that he will care for us. And to let that all the way into the place where we live, in our hearts, the deepest part of us. I'm going to trust in God. If a fear comes to my mind, I don't have to be afraid. A worry comes, I don't have to worry. I can trust in my God. He is going to be with me. And so that whole business of being a disciple of Jesus, when he says, if you have any possessions, you can't be my disciple, because you never hear what I'm saying. You'll never get free if you need to own anything, if you need anything but me. I was praying once, and I remember very clearly the Lord saying to me, Joe, I can't be everything for you if anything else is something for you. I can't be everything for you if anything else is something for you. The Lord wants us to know He's Lord. He's God. We're in His hands. He wants to be everything. And out of that security, out of that connectedness, comes the freedom not to need money, not to need things to fill us up, not to need to control others or control situations, and all those other kinds of possessing and attachment that we talked about earlier. Maybe the word getting free. You listen to the Lord, you let it in, and you let it touch all those areas that are really where you live. Listen and say yes, obedience. Listen and say yes. Let go of the junk. And the word I like the best is unencumbered. To be unencumbered, to travel free, to travel light, without burdens. The whole business of forgiveness. You can't travel light if you're carrying unforgiveness around. Because if somebody hurts you and you haven't let go of that, if you haven't forgiven them and let go of that, then it just festers inside. And it becomes hatred, and it becomes bitterness. And all kinds of avenues to your heart, to peace and joy and freedom. You're just so bound up by all this junk that you may believe in the Lord and you may have the hope of the Holy Spirit working in you, but you're not free. And you're not happy. And the Lord said He came to set us free. So we let go of that junk. All it ever does is destroy us. All it ever does is define us. All that unforgiveness and bitterness and hatred and anger, all it ever does is destroy us. The one who carries it is destroyed. And the Lord wants to set us free. The reason He forgives sins is He doesn't want us to carry around guilt. If you're carrying guilt around, you can't be free. You can't be, you can't be into the joy of life. Let go of it. Let go of the guilt. Be forgiven. Let go of the hatred. It's only messing up your life and everybody else who touches you. There's another thing. We used to say all the time when I was younger, you can't give what you don't have. It was a Latin thing, but I'm not going to bore you with that. You can't give what you don't have. There's a corollary to that. You give away what you do have. If you're full of bitterness and anger, that's what you give away. If you're not peaceful, if you're constantly troubled, that's what you give away. Everybody around you senses it. You introduce it into every situation where you are. If you're full of a lust for money or for power, wherever you go, that's what you give away. If you're full of service, that's what you give away. If you're full of generosity, that's what you're giving away. You know what I mean? You can't give away what you don't have, but you do give away what you are. If you're full of fears, you'll give that away. I don't know how many people I encounter. I am so blessed in the way I was brought up. My mother was just gosh, she was good to me in so many ways. But we used to, down in Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware, where I grew up, we'd have a lot of thunderstorms in the summertime. And she used to take us to the window to watch the lightning and to listen to the angels bowling or moving the furniture around, And I've met so many people, lightning, man, thunder, they run and hide in the room or under the bed and they're scared to death because of the thunder and lightning and they got all these fears. I say, how come you're afraid of that? Well, my mother was. My mother was afraid of traveling in planes, and I'm afraid of traveling in planes. or my father was, or whatever. We give away what we have. We're full of fears, we give that away. And the impressionable ones among us pick that up too. If you give away trust in God and faith and joy, you don't have to sell it, it's there. Okay. Somebody asked me about this business of forgiving when I said, sooner or later you come to the place where you don't have to forgive anymore because you understand that there is nothing to forgive. And I'm sure that's where God is. He totally understands us where we are. Did you ever read any of these accounts of life after life? People going down the tunnel and meeting this understanding light or this character? Did you ever notice that not one person is ever rejected? They're all come away with this experience of being totally understood. And they bring that, so I'm not afraid to die at all. Because I'm going to meet this character who totally understands, where I feel totally loved. With total understanding, you can love anybody. But Jesus says, forgive one another as you have been forgiven. And that's a good first step. It's a good first step on the way to getting to the place where you realize you don't have to forgive at all. Now, my topic this afternoon was going to be loving and being loved. And that's got everything to do with everything we've been talking about. You see, I'm just taking these simple sayings of Jesus and looking a little deeper with them. Getting down to where they touch us, where we're living, in all those little places where we're living. Where we can get free of this little junk and that little junk, and the next thing you know, you say, oh, that feels better. But Jesus came to tell us that we're loved. That God is love, and we're loved. And in all that means. He came to show us how to be free, to let go of the junk in our lives. And the freedom is the freedom to love. We're made in the image and likeness of God. And His command is, do what I do. You're made like me, so love like I do. I love the just and the unjust. I let the rain fall on the sinner and the saint. I never give up on anybody. I'm willing to forgive anything. Start over. That's what I care about. I made you like me. You can be like me. I share my own life with you. I share my spirit with you. I've made you to be like I am. So do it. You are love. I tell myself that again and again. I love to tell myself that. I am love. I am of God. God is of me. I'm part of God's creation. God is there. The people in India, the Hindus, they have this marvelous sense of the sacredness of everything. Because God is in and under and through everything. And so when they meet each other, they fold their hands. They use the same kind of thing for prayer like we do. Only they do this to each other. It's a recognition that the other person is sacred. That God is there. Isn't that nice? You are love. God is of you. God shares His own spirit with you. You are the enfleshment, the incarnation of God's Spirit today. Paul says you are the body of Christ. That means Christ is a title, the anointed of God, anointed with God's own Spirit. You are anointed with God's Spirit so you can do what God does. You got to claim it. You got to know that power is there. You are love. That's who you are. You are love. You are the incarnation of God in the world. Paul took this business of we being the body of Christ. Christ is the head and we are the members of the body, the enfleshment of the Spirit today. He took that so seriously. In chapter 6 of 1 Corinthians, he's talking about some of the converted Christians who are still going to the temple prostitutes. In the temples. And he said, don't you know you're joining the body of Christ to the body of the prostitute? This was not some mystical thing for Paul. It was the real flesh and blood thing. God's Spirit is in our flesh. We are together, that body. We are love. So many years ago, there was a young man that was part of the community we had in Pennsylvania. And he was asked to speak to this 5th grade group in a parochial school. And they came back to report on it. And he said, I was standing outside the classroom. I said, Lord, give me love for all of these kids. Give me love for them. When I go in there, let them know that your love is in me and they can see that in me. I thought that was a wonderful prayer. I'm going to pray that myself. And every place I've gone to preach or retreat, a parish retreat or something like that, I always include a healing service because I think that's the authentication of the preaching. Whenever Jesus sent the disciples out to announce the coming of the kingdom, he said, while you're at it, heal the sick. It's a little thing for God. And we should expect that to be able to happen because God's with us and God's going to do it, right? This is the normal thing. There's nothing special about that. And I prepare myself that day, and I pray, and I, Lord, open my heart, let all the junk out, and give me love. Let the love that is in me that is of you, let it come through for each one who comes. And one time, I invited anybody who wished to be prayed with to come forward, and they all lined up, and the first one came to me was a lady, little old lady with white hair, and as I looked at her, and I was letting this love, and I'm saying out loud, not under my breath to myself, I'm saying, I love you, as I look at her. I saw a little baby girl being born, being held by her mother and father as a little infant. Little girl in the backyard by a tree in a little white dress like at her first communion. I saw a little girl going to school for the first day, graduating from high school, being married. In a flash of an instant, I said, God sees us every moment of our lives instantaneously. How could you not love that little girl in the backyard or that little infant girl? And it was just this, revelation. Yeah, this is that beautiful, beautiful little baby that grew into this lovely older lady. And she's lovable. And of course, the vehicle of God's healing life and power is love. And that woman was healed. Instantly healed as we laid hands on her and asked the Lord to love her. We are love. Just a few simple little reminders of things you already know. Like sometimes I find this ministry of preaching to be kind of silly because all I can say is things you already know. But it pays, and we need to be reminded. Love is basically presence. It's being present to each other. To love the world is to be present to it in wonder. To really be paying attention. Pay attention. Do you have any people in your life who pay attention to you? Do you ever talk to somebody and you say, pay attention? Because their mind is somewhere else, and they're reading the paper. Right. And they're really not paying attention to you. Have you had that experience sometimes? Yes. Have you ever been that way with someone else? Yeah. Years and years ago, there was a song, Little Things Mean a Lot. Isn't that where life is lived? Little things. Like paying attention to somebody when they're talking to you. There was a Jewish psychiatrist who said this thing called dialogue, which was so big back in the 60s. Dialogue meaning I'm really paying attention to you, you're really paying attention to me, and we start a conversation, we never know where it's going to go because we're bouncing off each other. He said it hardly ever happens. Mostly what we have is duologue. Duologue means I talk and you don't listen, then you talk and I don't listen. And the epitome of that is two TV sets turned on facing each other. But it's like, I can't wait till you stop the nonsense you're dribbling so I can tell you what's really going on. And we hardly ever respond. You ever listen to a talk show on TV or on the radio? People get on and they get really angry about something. The next caller calls in. There's absolutely never any mention of anybody else. Somebody doesn't ever say, gee, that's an interesting thought. I'm going to think about that a little bit. Maybe I'll change my mind. We come in with our own ideas, which we own, and nobody's about to talk us out of it because we're right and they're wrong. Dialogue, paying attention, contemplating each other. You want to love the people in your life more? Reflect on them. Look at them with wonder. Look at them fresh. I remember once talking to a group of Cursillo men. And I was saying, when you go home from this weekend, look at your wife as though it was the first time in your life. Look at her fresh. Notice the wrinkles that are there that weren't there when you married her. Look at her hands. Look at the way her body is changed. Look at it fresh. And think, why has this woman stayed with me? You know? But look at her as a fresh human being. You've probably been taking her for granted for so long you haven't seen her in years. And we do that to each other. You know, we do that to each other. Be present, really present. Some remarkable things happened in the families of those guys. I mean, absolutely wonderful changes took place in those families. It was astounding. But right then, there was a colored man, a black man. He was the only one. He was our token black on the retreat. God, are we unjust? Anyhow, he was used to going to a Baptist responsive church. And he was, wherever I was talking to him, he was getting into the rhythm. Amen, brother. Right on. And I loved it because it was a whole new thing for me. And we were going. But I was talking about this, be present. That's a way of concrete loving somebody. He says, can I interrupt you? I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to tell you something. He says, every morning I wake up, I look over at my wife and I really look at her. And I say to her, woman, I take you for my wife today. I said, holy smokes. Is that beautiful or what? There's that being present now. And we so easily get into ruts and take ourselves and each other for granted. Loving is work, and the work that pays off, the work that makes a difference, is being present to each other. One man wrote once of how he learned this, and he decided to go home and try it. He says, how when the kids are little, they want to come in and they show you stuff, and they found a leaf or a worm or something, and they got to show you, or they did a crayon drawing, and you're reading the paper, you've been working all day, and you're sitting there, yeah, that's nice, yeah, and they keep flashing it and pulling on you. He says, this one night, his young son came in, and he had something from the street, and he folded up his newspaper and he put it down, and he picked his son up and stood him on his knee, and he looked at it and pointed to something and said, that's really nice. And he let go, and his son jumped off and ran away and didn't come back. His son recognized that his father paid attention to him. He didn't have to come back. He was just present, and the kid knew it instantly. If only we could do that. Being present. That's what makes a liturgy work. That's what makes our mass, our gathering work. We come in sensitive to God's presence. Sensitive to the presence of each other, welcoming, hospitable, caring. And as the word is proclaimed, we're sensitive and present to the word. We're present to the Lord who comes to us in Eucharist. Presence and wonder. To recapture the childlike wonder. But you can't if you take everything for granted. If you're blunted. If you can't see the wondrousness of it all. And I think a wonderful place to start in being present and recapturing a sense of wonder is your own self. To look in the mirror and see how wonderful and beautiful a creation you are. When that becomes part of you, you're saying to your body, live. You're saying to yourself, live. It's a live message. I am a beautiful, wonderful creation of God. And you are. You're so complicated, it's unbelievable. All those different systems working in you. They'll never get a computer to work like your brain does. There's a beauty to you and a wonder. What a wonderful creation. And the more you appreciate that in yourself, the more you begin to see it in everybody else. And everything changes in your relationships because you've changed. You've changed. Everything, the reign of God is in your heart. How do you love effectively? When you stop trying to control. When you are more interested in understanding where someone is coming from than from changing them. When you're more interested in listening than you are in telling. When you're more interested in giving than in receiving. When you take the prayer of St. Francis seriously. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, and all like that. These are simple little things, which is the way we express love. I know a lot of people who love each other, but neither one knows it. One of the little ways that we can express love is thoughtfulness. I think about the other person and ways to show my love. Somebody said that probably the best way to communicate love effectively is to love the other person in a way that makes a difference to them. I have a lot of people who give me things and do things for me that I never wanted in the first place. And they're loving me in a way that makes a difference to them, not to me. They're loving me in a way that makes them feel good, not me. My mother had this tradition in our family that when it was your birthday, you could pick what you want to eat. One of my favorites was apple dumplings. I had this thick crust and cinnamon and sugar in the middle, and this milk sauce that you poured over it with vanilla in it and all, you know. And sometimes when it wasn't my birthday, I'd come home and she was making them nice. I really felt loved because I knew she was making them for me. I've seen it so often in families where one or the other said, I think we'll go out to dinner tonight. She'll really like that. Or I think I'll cook this for him because he really likes that. That's thoughtfulness. You know what I mean? It's loving the other in a way that makes a difference to them, not to you. The other is do-gooding. We don't need any of that. You know what I mean? But if you contemplate the people in your life, a great way to pray is to take one person in your life who's close to you, part of your family, somebody you work with. Spend your prayer time just reflecting on them, looking at them with wonder, looking at them with attention. Lord, help me to see this person the way you do. Help me to see the good things that I can think about this person. And help me to see ways that make this person feel love, and I can do them. You know what I mean? Simple little stuff. As I said, sometimes we aren't so good at communicating that. I remember giving a retreat to high school girls one time years and years ago. And one of them came in to see me during conference time, and she was all upset. She said, my parents don't love me. You know, they're on my back all the time. I got to be in at 10 o'clock at night. If I want to have any friends, I got to bring them over to the house. They're hassle, hassle, hassle. So I looked at her and I said, gee whiz, it probably would be better if they didn't have anything to do with you. They didn't care who you ran with or what time you got in. If they showed no interest at all, I guess that would be better, huh? And then I says, you know, when they brought you home from the hospital, this cute little fragile little baby girl, so need of protection and care and affection, and all these years, that's the way they've treated you. They've surrounded you and showered you with affection and protection, and the only reason they're going to all the trouble they're going to and all the hassle they get from you to see that you're not going to get into trouble is because they love you so much. But you're looking for something else. You're looking in the wrong place, so you can't even see what's right there. And we often do that. You know, we do this with each other. If you really loved me, you would. I said, but I'm doing this, and this, and you never even notice. We come with these preconceptions, which we lay on the other person, and never tell them. You know, and we don't, and because we're looking in one place, we don't see the other place. There's so much love that is unacknowledged and not communicated. And if you think you're not loved by somebody, look around. Look around at the ways in which they show it, which may not be the way you're looking for them. And you can discover a lot of neat stuff. You know, one of the things I've heard preached in the Charismatic Renewal Conference in so many different places is, you know, the Lord is asking us to lay down our lives for each other. Lay down your life. That's a bit of an exaggeration, you know that? I had to risk my life a couple of times for somebody, but it's only twice in my whole life. The most that most people ask of me is show up on time. Or pay attention to me when I'm talking to you. Well, we're not asking you to lay down your life. Do the little things. Do the little things. That's really what makes the difference. This whole business of loving. God is love and you are love. You are love. Look at it in 4 different ways. Life is about loving yourself. Loving the beautiful creation God made you to be. Not letting anybody else cheapen it. Not letting anybody else lay expectations on you. It's you discovering you. The you that God made. The unique creation He made. Respecting it and loving it. And going with it. That's terribly important. Because if you haven't got that, you can't do any of the rest of it. And loving others. Secret to living. The secret to living. It is caring about other people in all these little ways. Noticing, doing. Unencumbered. Not afraid. Not distracted by all your fears and all of these needs that leave you so tied up you haven't got any time or energy for anybody else. And therefore never the joy in relationships. You get rid of all that junk, you got yourself to give away. And a chance to notice and a chance to live. And it's wonderful. And to love His world, His creation, because God's in the creation, in all of His creation. I know one Franciscan says one of his favorite ways of praying is taking a very, very, very slow walk in the woods. Maybe take a half a step and I notice a leaf that's fallen to the ground and I just stare at it. What a wonderful thing that is. And looking with freshness and wonder at everything. I can take a walk for 2 hours and not go more than 6 feet. That's what little children do. Everything's full of wonder. We take it all for granted like we know it all. We miss so much to love God's world. And of course to love God. I've read so many accounts. When I was in the seminary many, many years ago, I started writing articles for spiritual magazines. And the first one I had published was about when we pray, the Lord expects us to enjoy it. Living with the Lord is meant to be a very enjoyable experience. Those who have never experienced it have written books by the thousands and articles by the tens of thousands on the honeymoon of the spiritual life. And don't expect to keep getting that. And dryness in prayer. And the reason they write those kind of books is because they're dried up people. And the great spiritual masters, the great ones, have always said prayer should be a joy. Being quiet in the presence of the Lord and always and everywhere, living in wonder and noticing His presence and the little signs of the ways He loves you. I remember I was really down one time and a couple of birds kept flying to the window of my room. So what are you doing there? The Lord was amusing me. All these little things happen. Sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm doing the right thing, and I get a letter from somebody I've never met. I haven't been in that place for 10 years. They said, just with thinking of you, thought I'd tell you how much you touched my life in the talk you gave in Hamilton 10 years ago. Then what's that coming for now, today? Synchronicity. The Lord's governing everything. He knows what I need. And He touches me this way. Lots of times I'm looking for, Lord, what am I supposed to do? And I'm reading a novel of espionage. Some wild, stick-em-up kind of thing. And there's this wisdom in there that jumps out and says, oh, isn't that interesting? It speaks to me where I am. To notice God everywhere and His hand in our lives. That's what it's all about. And receiving of love is the other side of it. We gotta be in gratitude all the time. To open our hearts to how much we've been loved, to let it in. Because so many of us just don't believe we're lovable. If there's any obedience at all that is going to set you free, to listen and to say yes down in your heart of hearts where you really live, you let the voice of God speak to you. I love you. I love you. I am with you. I am for you. And the easiest way into that is to begin thanking God for absolutely everything. Everything. To spend an hour just sitting there quietly thanking God. Lord, I thank you for my indoor bathroom. I thank you for running water and toilets. You know, like everything you can think of that is part of your life, thank Him for it. And the more you do, the more it just sinks in. I am loved. I have been cared for. I have been spoiled. It just sinks in. And you become a Eucharistic person. And that's what it's all about. You're full of gratitude. You're in the hands of a loving God who's always been there and done so much you've never noticed. And as you begin to notice, your heart gets on fire. And you grow in all that love by taking time out to be alone together to share. By taking time out to be alone together to share. You share your heart with the Lord. You share your hearts with each other. You notice the beauty of nature. You take time to smell a rose. And you take time to love yourself. And then you know the message of the good news. Because you become the good news. You're free. You're unencumbered. No junk. No hatred. No anger. Just that inner peace that gets deeper and deeper. That's pretty wonderful. Amen. Amen. How long did I go? Too long. Wow. Thank you, everybody. We'll meet again tomorrow. If you got any questions or comments or anything, I'd love to hear them now. But we're kind of late, I think, aren't we?
Right on time.
Right on time. That's what I said. Incidentally, we have some of these books here gathered before the Lord that if you're interested, there's a few left over. They make wonderful Christmas presents. No.
Yes.
I'm only kidding.